everybody, to our pre-holiday show. We are like as pre-holiday as you can get here. It's December 23rd, at least for those of us who celebrate Christmas. Um, and we are talking about what happens when your student comes home for the holidays. They've been at school for all of 3 months at this point and announce that they are not happy and want to transfer. And joining us to talk through that is my colleague, Christine Kenyon, who is also a former admissions officer at Babson and was a reader and interviewer for two very selective scholarship programs at Duke and the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. Hi, Christine.
Hello, Beth. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. And thank you for joining today.
Sure.
I guess, my first question for you is a parent, your child comes home and says, I want to transfer. What do you do? How do you handle it?
First of all, I think that's very normal. So I think that the first semester of college is a really big transition for students, especially coming off of COVID quarantine and lockdowns, hybrid schooling. The world's been weird. Adjusting to college life has always been a transition for young adults,
Hmm.
through a global pandemic, and it's even harder for students to socialize and find their people. So I think that number one, know that this is very normal, and I think instead of panicking, which I think as a parent, sometimes that's my first thing. It's like, what do I do? How do I make this better?
How do I
Instead
fix
of
it? Right.
panicking, yes, how do I fix it?
Yep.
Um, Trying to think through how you can get to the root of what's causing your student to feel like they're not happy at their current place.
Right. So would you start maybe with why you're there in college in the first place? Maybe academics? What do you how would you probe there?
Yeah. So I think I'd keep things open ended and I'd start by saying, okay, what makes you feel that way? And see which path they lead you down. For some students, they might say, I'm just really homesick. It's too far across the country. I really want to be closer to home. For other students, it might be that they're realizing their hopes to be a doctor and their pre-med aspirations are just not aligning with the realities of the grades that they're getting and
Mm.
the workload, and that academically, this isn't the right fit for them. For other students, it might be more socially focused, where they say, I really love my classes. I've met some great professors. I just haven't found my people yet. And I think
Hmm.
depending on what the student focuses on as the reason that they might not be totally happy, that can inform the conversation you have. Because some things are growing pains, and other things, there might be a mismatch between the student and the university where transferring could be a good option.
Right, right. And I am always pointing to social media as a it's a challenge in general, as I am on social media and spend way too much of my time probably on social media. I absolutely see some significant challenges. I'm an adult. I have presented enough of myself on social media to recognize that what you put out there and what your everyday life looks like. I'm not posting when I go to the post office, but I post when I take a really cool trip, right? But
Mhm.
I think too, when you're teenagers and you live so much of your life online, and it appears that everyone else is loving their new environment, I think that contributes an even greater amount to students feeling like, even if they were just sort of ambivalent or like, I'm going to figure it out, then they see all their friends and it looks like, wow, I must have made a bad choice. Look at how much fun everybody else is having,
Yes.
you know?
I think that is such a good point, and it's so much harder. I'm so grateful that social media wasn't like fully up and running when I was in college, because I think that does make it so much harder. And for students to kind of figure out what's right for them, it doesn't help to kind of see all this chatter in the background of what other people are doing and how their experience is, especially if you come from a very college going family or a very um, college going town or high school. If so much of high school was focused on the next step, getting to college,
Hmm.
it puts so much pressure on students to feel like, okay, if it's not perfect in every way when they get there, did they make a huge mistake? Did they do something wrong? Is their life not going to end up being successful and happy?
Right.
No, that's not the path we want them to go down. But I think that can be a very natural train of thought, because of social media and because of seeing what people want you to see versus the reality.
Right. And I would say if your child is saying, well, so and so loves it, and well, how do you know? Have you talked to that person, or is it, like probing, like you said, probing a little bit more deeply. I know, there was no social media because that's how long ago I went to college. There was no social media then. Thank God. There were no phones. Thank God. Not everyone had a camera ready to take video which thank God again. All of these things are really helpful to my growth. But one thing I would see is if I was walking on campus somewhere, I might see big groups of people talking and laughing, and I think it's the same basic concept. Everybody's having fun without me,
Yeah.
kind of, is the idea. And really, as I went through my years in school, what I started to recognize is that those big groups of people were just a bunch of freshmen that glommed onto each other and were
Hmm.
going from place to place. And being part of that group didn't make you any happier than walking apart from that group.
Hmm.
So I would be having a lot, if the claim is social is the challenge, I would have a lot of conversations about
Yes.
where that's coming from.
I agree. And I
Yeah.
think that's FOMO, fear of missing out, right? And I think if the social piece is leading the transfer conversation, dig deeper because it may just be that, things haven't quite settled in correctly yet.
Right, right. Now, so maybe your student has extraordinarily good reasons and it turns out that they thought there was a major in X and it doesn't exist, or they have a new focus and you really knowing your child know, okay, this is real. We should start thinking about transferring. But let's say that you're you're not convinced. What are some suggestions that you would have for either digging deeper, but also for maybe redirecting or making suggestions for when the student returns to school?
Hmm. Yeah. So I think that the transfer process is a lot of work and it's much more detailed than the undergrad admission process because you have to be so focused in your applications. And we're talking about transferring from one four-year institution to another, right? This is
Hmm.
separate from students who start at community college who are transferring into a
Right.
four-year degree. Um, so when that's the case, I think it's really important to kind of probe and sort of say, okay, well, it's a lot of work to apply. We know that. You still need professor recommendation. So, who might you ask? Who have you been talking to on campus? What staff members or faculty members have you connected with who could speak to your involvement in the classroom, outside of the classroom, and see what they say? Think through how to articulate why you want to transfer. Saying, I'm not happy is not enough.
Right.
Saying that you want to go to a more selected institution because your ego was bruised from how your results turned out when you applied as a first year student is not enough.
Right.
And so you have to think through what is making me so willing to go through the transition of starting college all over again because it's the same thing. You're
Hmm.
starting with new peers in a new place with new bedding and a new location, and you got to figure it all out. So you have to really want that to be willing to put yourself through a second transition year of starting at a new place and finding new people, especially when students will have already met some of their
Yes.
people and things would
They've
have
already
gelled a little bit
spent a
more.
year there, right? So you're
Yeah.
coming in now as a new person with
Mhm.
a group of students who have been together for a year.
Yeah.
So sorry, I
So
cut you
I'd
off.
say, no, no, I'd say talk to your advisor, talk to a professor who you've connected with, talk to a staff member. Admissions counselors are super nice, fun people. Talk to your admission counselor if you connected with them. But the staff members, the faculty who work on college campuses do so because they like working with this age of students. They like working with young adults. They're there to assist you. That doesn't mean that they're always going to be able to solve your problems or they're
Hmm.
always going to be in the best mood ever, but reach out to these resource centers on campus and connect with people to ask questions about how to make sure that you can't find what it is you're looking for at your current university before kind of pulling the ripcord.
Right. And then probably moving forward from that, what does this next institution have to have? Because to your point, it can't be, well, it needs to be more selective, and all my friends are at schools with more recognizable brand names, and I want that too. Or it can't be, I don't know what I am looking for. I just know I don't want this.
Right.
Because what's going to prevent you from winding up in the next place being feeling the same, right? You need to articulate what you want. Any tips
Yes.
for that?
Yeah, and I think that's something that I really looked closely at when I was reviewing transfer applications for Babson,
Hmm.
because we only had a small number of transfer seats available each year, depending on how many first year students didn't enroll in their sophomore year. So
Hmm.
some years we'd have 5 spots open, other years
Yeah.
we'd have 50, like it just
Hmm.
depended. Um, and so my job as an admission counselor was to say, okay, how can I advocate for this student in committee to say that they deserve a spot here at our institution when they could go on and study whatever they're studying at their other institution, get a bachelor's degree in
Hmm.
comparison to this student who's finishing their associates. That's a terminal degree. They can't get a bachelor's at their
Right.
current institution, and they've been rocking it. And they have great grades and good involvement, and now they're looking to kind of get their bachelor's degree. What is going to make this student who has that opportunity available to them already
Hmm.
more compelling than this community college student who
Hmm.
needs this degree to move forward with their career? Um, I'm forgetting your question. I got
Well, it
off
was just
topic, but
sort of like how to get them thinking about what is it that they
yes,
want, not what they don't want, but what they do want. Because
yes.
that's the other thing, right? Like you have to come up with now a group of schools that you're going to apply to as a transfer,
Mhm.
and how do you develop that list?
Yes. So if it's something like you're at a large public state institution that has 40,000 students and it just feels way too big, start by looking at smaller schools, but there also has to be something else. It
Right.
can't just be the size that is driving it. And so you have to really identify and pinpoint a handful of opportunities that you could only have at this other place
Hmm.
that you can then articulate in your application for admissions to explain, this is why I want to be at your school. I've got great resources here. You don't want to badmouth the school that you're at, right?
No.
But I think that this is a better fit for me, and here's why.
Right, right. And then, of course, the challenge is if it's primarily social, right? That's a little tricky because how are you going to be able to confirm that your people who are not at the school you're at will be at the school you're not at? And I don't want to discount the idea that you can really find that a place is not a social fit. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking of a student of a friend of mine who wound up at a school that was on her list that she liked, but if she had been fully honest with herself, she never thought she was going to wind up there. She
Yeah.
thought that another school would come through. And when she got to the school, the parents loved the school. They thought it was great. They were happy to have her there. It really was student driven, but she just felt like there were kind of two groups of students who were there. Either a group like her who felt like, ugh, this is not, this was acceptable, but not where I thought I would be, or
Mhm.
who were so thrilled to be there and like super gung ho, and nothing in the middle, and really just couldn't seem to find. And I actually, knowing this, I think it was fairly legit. And actually, the student has since transferred to another institution that is a really good fit, that I think, wasn't super focused on just an early decision, like didn't have a huge early decision population. So maybe, I don't know what that means, if they were more thoughtful. I'm not really sure. But it can't just be about the social. But there was a challenge there because everything the student wanted academically was available. But how do you say, the students party too much and I want a more serious environment? That's a tricky one. I'm curious
Yeah.
about. And what do you say as a parent to that?
Yeah. So I think number one, the student has to do their research, even more so than when you apply as a 12th grader into your first year
Hmm.
of college. You have got to talk to as many live humans who attend that institution to get the real deal experience. If
Yeah.
it's safe, if it's accessible, to kind of spend time on campus, sit in on a class, interview, like you got to do it all to really be 100% sure that this other place feels like the right social fit for you,
Right.
feels like your people. The other thing is, you always want to be positive in your applications, right?
Yes.
You want to
Hmm.
give
You
admission
do.
counselors reasons to advocate for you, right? And so you don't want to badmouth your institution, but I think, like you said, it's very valid to say, this social scene isn't right for me.
Right.
So instead, what you have to do after doing your research is to identify, I've come to realize in this last year that I really love X. And I was so excited to see that you have a lab dedicated to researching X. It would be such a joy to be surrounded by other peers who share my excitement in this area, because I haven't quite found that at my current institution.
Right.
And I'm so excited to see, X, Y, and Z happening on yours.
Yes. Yeah.
So the research I think is really important because it can lead to legitimate opportunities to talk about fit. And it doesn't have to be academic related. It can be, you know, the mission statement of your university, its focus on diversity and inclusion is something that I didn't realize I was going to miss, going from a really diverse high school to a less diverse college. After one semester, while I'm happy enough here, I really keep thinking back to your mission statement and the fact that you have this resource center on campus and you have volunteer opportunities on this with this thing in the city you're located in.
Right.
Those are all legitimate reasons to sort of get at the heart of the community of a campus without being negative about the current place you're at.
Right, right. So to sum up the advice that we have, that you've sort of provided today, I think the couple of key things: ask a lot of questions, really dig more deeply, and don't let it it's as easy as I'm just not happy and I want to transfer, and then you start scrambling, right? Dig more deeply. Is there a particular place that you have in the back of your mind that really has kind of started to loom as like this, I would be happier there? And then you really have to do your research. So dig deeply, really be thoughtful, really think about, can I go back and do some things differently? And at what point do we really truly decide, yep, I think I need to transfer? And you want to go through those steps. And we've talked about transferring in the past, where today was really more about, what do you do if your student comes home? But we will do transfer segments in the future and talk a little bit more about the actual steps that you need to take to transfer. But any final words?
Yes. The one other thing I want to mention is that if financial aid, scholarships, grants are going to be part
Good
of
point.
the decision-making process for your family. If that's a part, if that was part of how the student made their decision to enroll at, University A, and now they're looking to transfer, you need to read the fine print very closely on the financial aid websites, because some colleges have ample scholarships and grants available for first-year students, but they don't offer any for transfer students.
Yes.
So you got to make sure that financially it's a match as well, because the reality may be that, yes, it meets all of these expectations socially and academically, but it's going to cost you 3 times as much to attend. And if that's the case, that might not be a good
Right,
fit
exactly. A bad fit
all.
for a different reason. Christine,
Yes.
thank you so much for joining today. I really appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
All right, we're going to take another quick break. And when we come back, we are talking about how to prevent people from ruining your college process. They don't try, but they do sometimes succeed without meaning to. So we're going to give you some tips for fending that off. So stick around.